series, and we kind of plan things according to series, and we're just finishing up 8 weeks on this understanding of how we're kind of significant people, and not ourselves, but because God's made us that way. And we've talked about this understanding of being on mission, not just going on a mission trip or having a short-term understanding of the fact that God is using me, but the fact that I am on mission all the time. And the passage we've been using from the Bible is from Jeremiah 24, verse 7. That's where we get our 24/7 understanding. If you haven't caught that, it took you 8 weeks maybe to get to that point. But 24, verse 7 translates into the 24/7 that we're on mission all the time. Here's that passage, just so you kind of get this in your head one more time as we start tonight. This is the Lord talking, and He says, I will give them a heart to know me, that I am the Lord. They will be my people, and I will be their God, for they will return to me with all their heart. And so God here promises to give His people a heart to know Him. So we've been spending some weeks talking about, well, what does it mean to get to know God? And that's kind of a tough question. I want to say to you tonight that biblically, if you haven't caught this yet, or again, if you're just joining us tonight for the first time, biblically, to know God or to know a person means to experience them, not just to know about them, not just to get kind of a list or read about them, but to actually experience them in some way. A few weeks ago, we talked about Moses, and Exodus chapter 16, there's this conversation that he's having back and forth with God here. And God says this to them. He says, in the evening, you will know that it was the Lord who brought you out of Egypt. And in the morning, you will see the glory of the Lord. And what he's saying there is, as the people were hungry, as they were crying out, in fact, they were kind of complaining against God, he said, you will experience my goodness because I'm going to provide food for you both in the morning and evening. And so he says, that's how you're going to get to know me. And ultimately, in human encounters, the way that the Bible uses the word know, it kind of climaxes in sexual context. So the Bible says, if you look at some older translations, and Adam knew his wife Eve, they're playing cards. It means that there's a greater and greater intimacy until there's nothing really guarded with an interpersonal connection. And that's how the Bible talks about our relationship with God. That as we know Him, we experience Him with greater and greater intimacy. It doesn't involve a sexual contact of any kind. But God knows we understand those kind of things experientially. He says, that's kind of how it is as you get to know me. You experience me. You're no longer guarded with me. You become more and more vulnerable until there's this total trust between us. So we've been talking about that. And where do we find being on mission? Well, that's pretty much everywhere you look. I mean, God's everywhere, right? So we started out looking at a wider basis. There's a little outline on your table. And if you've been with us, that might just give you a chance to take a little quiz, thinking about all those different contexts. See if you can keep ahead of me and fill some of those out. Matthew's going to throw these up on the screen as we go through them. We started out looking pretty wide. We said, hey, we are sent on mission 24/7 in our what? World. And then we narrowed it down one notch, and we went to nation, and then city was next. Yeah, community. I'm picking on you over here. Community is just going to be a little bit narrow. So we still at city. We looked at Nehemiah that night. Ryan gave a message on that. And then was workplace and or school. Some of you are at work, some in school. So that's kind of your main context. Daniel was the guy from the Bible we talked about there. And then neighborhood, also known sometimes as your immediate community. And then tonight, home. So this is where we're going to finish off tonight. This is your closest context. There's an author named John Eldridge, and I'm just going to share one paragraph with you because I think he sums up this entire series pretty well. And he says, every great journey involves a quest. In J.R.R. Tolkien's The Hobbit, are you familiar with that? Bilbo Baggins ran from the door at 11:45 without even as much as a pocket handkerchief and launched on an adventure that would change his life forever. Alice stepped through the looking glass into Wonderland. Lucy, Edmund, Susan, and Peter stumbled through the wardrobe into Narnia. Abraham left his country, his people, and his father's household to follow the most outlandish sort of promise from a God he'd only just met, and he never came back. Jacob and his sons went to Egypt for some groceries, and 400 years later, the Israelite nation pulled up stakes and headed for home. Peter, Andrew, James, and John all turned on a dime one day to follow their master, their fishing nets heaped in wet piles behind them. And what he calls the sacred romance, this journey that we're on, he says, this sacred romance involves for every soul a journey of heroic proportions. And while it may require for some a change of geography, for every soul it means a journey of heart. I think that pegs it pretty well. That some of these contexts that we're talking about you have to travel to get to, but for everyone, for God to use this, he really has to work with this thing called our heart. And we keep coming back to this issue of the heart. Jesus talks about that more. The Bible talks about that more than just about anything you think of. I love the Old Testament passage that says, above all else, guard your heart, for it is the wellspring of life. And everything else comes out of that. So just look at that list for a minute, now that you've got some of those. And I'd like you to just mark two different things, all right? First of all, if you look at all those different things, mark with the number one, the item that you think you're maybe doing the best job of making a difference in. And if you're a father, this is where I really represent Christ pretty well. And if you're still kind of on that journey somewhere else, just say, hey, here's maybe where I'm the most effective, or I do the best job. But really being, kind of this understanding of being on mission, what context are you probably doing the best at right now? We'll put a number one there. And then take the letter G and put it next to one other item as an area where you would have a goal. This is an area that maybe over the next months you would like to grow in somehow. Now every week we've had somebody talking to you. Now last week, I think we had some snow, if I remember right. So we did not meet here. We were kind of starting with this, and Ryan and I were talking. I said, do we pull the plug? Don't we? And then he said, hey, I just got an email. Schlafly is closing their doors for the day. So we said, that pretty much answers your question for us. Did anybody stand outside the front doors last week and wait for us? Did you? Did you just wave your hand? Okay, I thought I saw something. Okay, good. That's good to hear. Now, if we would have been with you, you would have heard a great message. I can't help that. Ryan was going to speak last week. It's one of those things, though, that kind of builds on this. If you think about those different areas, over the last weeks, we've had a different person every week speaking to you. Tonight, Amber Fiala is going to kind of share a little piece of her story. But the fact is, we haven't had the same person talk to you every week. These are different people each week. And I want to say to you, you cannot be equally effective in every one of these contexts all the time. You're going to have to focus on certain areas, and God's going to open some doors for you maybe. And so think about an area where you would set a goal for this year to say, maybe in the next 10 months or so, I really want to grow in effectiveness in this particular area. So maybe that gives you just a minute to think about some of that stuff, and keep that in front of you as we go through this. But tonight we're going to cap this off by talking a little bit about your context of home. All right? So what's home? That's kind of a tough question. Because I would bet that for each one of us, home looks a little bit different. Some homes are made up of a husband and wife and house in the suburbs, two-car garage, goldfish, golden retriever, all that kind of stuff. Cats. Who has cats? I'm sorry for you. It's tough though. A couple weeks ago I was out skiing in Colorado, and I went with 3 friends who are all in college. And we're all friends from St. Louis and from the same church. And they're now in college, kind of scattered across the Midwest, and so we picked everybody up along the way and we went skiing. And sometimes when we were riding up the chairlift, we would be paired up with people that we did not know. And what is the opening question normally when you are sitting with people that you don't know and you're forced to talk? So, where are you from, right? It was interesting as that question got asked over those 2 days that we were skiing. At the start it was like, oh, we're from St. Louis. As the 2 days went on, the answer got more complex. Well, we're friends from St. Louis, but I'm homeless in Nebraska or homeless Missouri. Or it kind of got a longer answer over a period of time as we tried to explain the connection to people. But that raises a good question. How do you define home? Is home the place where your parents live? Now, I think a lot of us, thankfully, we start out in homes, and that's kind of how God designs it, that we grow up in a home. And so for most of us, home initially is the place where our parents live. But at some point in time, we establish a home of our own. We leave home, we go to the military, we get a job, we go to school, we move out or we move in, something happens, and that shifts.